And today is Miami, so we have a whole political team down here today. I don't even know where they're in Colgate somewhere. They're interviewing. It's really good. It's better. It's picked up on both parties. It's picked up. I'll say a minute. I'll say something about that in a second.
Here to the Beacon Council and introduce myself. I'm Frank Bureau. I'm president of the Beacon Council. Our chair, Alan Becker, gives you his regards. He's out of town. Although I see I have at least two former chairs here, Jack Roll and Ben Malaire, so they can still, hold up the numbers if I do something wrong. So I still have the bosses here. I knew you would put it up right away. Let me welcome all of you here. This is a part of our ongoing series called Access, where we try and as informal a setting as possible to bring key leaders and decision makers, not only from Miami-Dade County but from the state here to talk with some of our business leadership about key issues and hopefully just have a dialogue about issues of importance. We're very pleased today to have someone who I've gotten to know over the past year, really first as a colleague and then as a friend and someone who I relied on for some very good advice. But I think you should know that Mark Wilson, who is our speaker today, serves as President and Chief Executive Officer of Florida's largest and most influential business advocacy organization, and which is, of course, the Florida Chamber of Commerce. The Florida Chamber of Commerce has really just so much on their plate and their portfolio, but it really, I think you most know them for substantial political lobbying, grassroots and economic research operations. They also focus on creating really a good business climate here in the state of Florida that hopefully generates prosperity and high-paying jobs, vibrant communities, and global competitiveness. They have focused really on job creation. One of the areas that we've had a lot of dealings with and that is the 6 pillars. And I think Mark's going to talk a little bit about that to you, which really looks at the future of Florida's economy, talent supply, education, innovation, economic development, infrastructure, growth, leadership, business climate, competitiveness, civic and governance systems, and the quality of life. That really in many ways align with the initiative that the Beacon Council and our partners have undertaken this past year, and that is the One Community, One Goal initiative. And so we were trying to make sure that when we launched that we were in lockstep with what the Chamber was doing. They had great legislative successes. Mark was the architect of groundbreaking statewide political campaigns in 2004, 2006 that passed significant constitutional amendment reforms, as well as numerous legislative and issue campaigns. And in 2010, we also worked, I think that's the first time we really got together and started to work very closely together when he served as treasurer and co-chair of Vote No on 4 campaign, which was an anti-growth proposal. And I think it was probably one of the most successful campaigns of organizing the business community, and that effort was defeated. Mark serves on the board of directors of the Florida Association of Chamber of Professionals, Enterprise Florida, which is our economic development partner in the state, Workforce Florida, that we work very closely with, and Holly Weedman is a member of our local board. He's on the Florida Chamber Foundation, the Council of State Chambers, as well as serving as an active member of the Council of 100, the U.S. Chambers Committee of 100, and the American Chamber of Commerce Executive. When do you sleep or eat or do anything? All of that. He is a native of Illinois. He received his undergraduate degree from the University of Georgia. I've seen it in his Seminole jacket, so. And he's earned his national designation of a certified chamber executive. Prior to joining the Florida Chamber, Mark served as vice president of the Chicagoland Chamber and previously served with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It's my pleasure to introduce to you a friend, a colleague, and a real leader in the state of Florida, Mark Wilson.
Frank, thank you very much for that. I assume you can hear me okay in the back? Okay, thank you. And again, Frank, thanks so much for that. It's just a real privilege to be invited to be here to talk with you today. Also, my goodness, that's enough about me. I'd really want to talk a little bit about you and about where Florida's going. And I'd be remiss if I didn't first thank and acknowledge the Florida Chamber has 2 board members here today. Jack Lowell is on the Florida Chamber's board, and also Bill Johnson's on the Florida Chamber's board. And I just wanted to honor the fact that you both came out for that, and you start to see, the more you travel Florida like I do, you start to see the overlap in the business community, and I think that just gives us a great big opportunity to really talk with one voice and to get even more on the same page than we have been in the past. Also, just a special thanks to the Beacon Council, you and Yvette and the team here. This was the first year I can remember where our teams were actually really working together. Everybody was on speed dial, first name basis. And it's not just on some of the big issues that you read about in the paper. There were some insurance issues like captive insurance that you all really put on the table, and we were proud to play a part in getting that to the governor's desk and ultimately where it needed to be. And so thanks for that. Thanks for your team for always being available for us. So I just want to dig right into a conversation that I'd like to have with you all. And we're having conversations similar to this all over our state these days. And we talk about free enterprise, and we talk about fighting for free enterprise. And have you noticed how you get punished these days for being a job creator? Right? So if you're successful, you get punished these days. And I'm not talking about tax codes and regulatory environments. I'm talking about the attitude in this country right now is that business is the problem, not the solution. And that's a significant concern of chambers of commerce across the country. And the Florida Chamber is one of the largest and recognized as one of the more successful chambers in the nation. And I think it's because this is a fight that we're not afraid to have. And when it comes to fighting for the business community, you know, it's often said about us, we're the nonprofit that's fighting to make sure you don't become one too. And if you think about that, that's basically what we're doing day in and day out, and we appreciate the partnerships that we have. Also, before I run through this, just a quick sort of personal/professional observation. So Frank gave you my background, and if you followed any of that, I moved to Florida. I was with the U.S. Chamber and the Chicago Chamber, and I came to Florida in '98. And sort of, you know, I'm a truth teller sort of then versus now. And I remember in '98, one of the first things I did at the Florida Chamber was I traveled the state. And, you know, without getting into names because they don't matter, when I came here, the conversation for the first 2 years was Miami's different. You know, we're not really part of Florida. You can just stay in Tallahassee. We're kind of doing our own thing here. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I have to tell you, you know, 10, 12 years later, you can't separate Miami from Florida in terms of the great things that are going on here. And when we talk about what's going on with trade, when we talk about what's going on with manufacturing, the public education conversation we're having, the transportation conversations we're having, when you go to Colombia, when you go to Brazil, like I do, like Frank has, like our board members have, these are conversations that are taking place all over the world. And I think we just have a huge opportunity to really speak with one voice. And I just think it's hard to see when you're going through it, but you think about it, the last decade, how much change has happened in our state and how the state is much more together on a sense of the future than we were, say, 10 years ago. That is not to say we don't have disagreements, and that's not to say we don't have challenges. But I think 10 years ago, there was a sense of we're all on different pages and we're all going to go it alone. And I think now there's a reality that we have one future. And if we don't work on it together, other countries are going to pass us by. Forget about Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina. It's other countries are going to pass us by. So let me dig right into this. What I plan to do is, in front of you is one of the two publications the Florida Chamber puts out every year. So before the legislative session starts, our members tell us what their priorities are. We translate that to the legislature, and we publish what we call the annual Florida Business Agenda. So it's what you tell us you need from the legislature. And then after session, we owe you the accountability of where were we successful, where did we fall down, and specifically, how did every single one of the 160 legislators vote on the issues that matter to you. That's what we call our annual report card of the Florida Business Agenda. So if you want details on how did we do, what passed, what didn't, they're really in here. And then I'm happy to spend as much time as anybody would like, either debating an issue or talking about what happened there, what does it mean, what do we have to do next year. To borrow a phrase, success is never final. You know, we can have a good year, but the other side just gets stronger. and they try to undo everything that we're doing. So this stuff just never ends. The fight goes on, if you will. And then I have a few slides sort of upcoming just to give us a sense of what we're up for in the elections this year. And we're a nonpartisan organization. We're pro-business, but we just need to take a look at kind of what's on the ballot. And there's 11 constitutional amendments this year, for example, and we need to take a look. I really want to honor the work that you've done here with your One Community, One Goal. And so if we just stop and pause for a minute and take an inventory of where Florida is today, you may have read, I say all the time, if you could buy stock in all 50 states, I'd be buying as much of it in Florida as I could, because if you read the newspapers, you get one perspective of what's going on. But if you actually dig into the data of how Florida's doing and what we're doing on the fundamentals, it's a pretty strong buy right now. But one of the reasons is, so we have 67 counties, right? 405 cities, 26 state agencies, and it's a little bit like an aircraft carrier with 5,000 outboard motors, where everybody gets to decide which direction the aircraft carrier is going to go in, and then you just start spinning and spinning. Until we came up with the 6 Pillars plan, which said, let's do in government what we do in the private sector. Let's put a long-term plan together for this company called Florida. And let's talk about what do we know about the future and how do we need to rally around it. So just a couple of quick data points, and then I want to talk about why this is so important to the greater good. So if you look at 2030 for a minute, we have 6 million more people are going to live in Florida in 2030 than live here right now. Right? That's not an if. That's the very best projections coming out from the very best demographers, that we have 6 million more people are going to live in Florida in less than 20 years. We're going to pass New York in the next 18 months to become the 3rd largest state in the country. If we were a country, we'd be the 20th largest economy on the planet. 25 years ago, we were the 5th cheapest place to live in the United States. And people in the Midwest drove down I-75 and on vacations and ended up moving here when they got older. And people from the Northeast drove down I-95 and they ended up here and on other parts of the East Coast of Florida. I mean, that's kind of our story. We were a cheap place to live, and that's kind of the demographics, if you will. But if you fast forward to now, we're not the 5th cheapest anymore, we're 25th. So if you think about it, our economic development plan for 25 years was we're going to be cheap. We've got great weather, great beaches, no income tax, and we're cheap. And growth drives a lot of economic development when those are your dynamics. The problem is the world changed, and Florida needs to change with it. So with 6 million more people coming, and when you go from 5th cheapest to 25th, you can't sit here and do what Nebraska and some other states do, which is to say, let's wait out this recession and we'll just go back to the way it used to be. I think we all have learned, I hope, that going back to what we were doing before is just simply not an option. So it's ironic that we're in a multi-story building today having this conversation, because I take great exception to the people who say, okay, 25 years ago we did tourism, we did construction, and we did agriculture, and now we have to forget about all of that and just move on to something else. That's folly. All right, the reality is, just like the building we're in right now, if you don't have a strong foundation and a strong first floor, then you can't be on the 24th floor. So what I need us to realize in Florida is tourism, agriculture, and construction will always be the foundation of our economy here in Florida. The goal isn't to move beyond it and forget about it. The goal is to grow tourism, agriculture, construction. Think about the exports. Think about the tourists that can come here. Think about the revenue that is generated. But the goal is we need a 2nd floor, a 3rd floor, a 4th floor. So as we start moving into manufacturing, when we start talking about exports, when we start talking about life sciences, when we start talking about commercializing what's coming out of our universities, that's not instead of tourism, agriculture, construction. It's just another floor in this growing economy that we call Florida. The significance of getting our arms around that is, if you didn't hear me say one thing today other than what I'm about to say, I think it's the major takeaway from today. There's this concept of, in Florida, in anywhere in the nation, when we let government decide okay, where are we going to go as a community, or where are we going to go as a state? If you think about what that means, it means that all of us in the private sector are basically saying, tell us what you need, we'll help you go where you want to go. That didn't work for Greece, it's not working too well for Spain, it won't work for Florida. And so you remember the Wall Street Journal article a few years ago that said, is Florida over? Anybody remember that front page article? So I was in the Atlanta airport on my way to a U.S. Chamber board meeting. It was a Saturday morning. And I walked past it and I thought to myself, did that say what I just think it said? Right? Bad day when you have my job, right? But the reality of it is, the article was exactly right. The old Florida is over. And we all need to kind of get, pull up the bootstraps and say, okay, how do we get to where we're going next? And everything has to change. The biggest thing that had to change is Florida needed to get its arms around one plan for the state. So with 6 million more people coming, right, we're going to be in 2019, 2020 before unemployment's under 5.5% again. We can debate that all day long, but facts are facts. So the question is, we need higher wage, higher skill jobs coming into Florida, and we need to grow them from companies who are already here, and we need to attract them. But here's the significance of what you're looking at up here, and then I'm going to get to the issues. We rolled out the 6-pillar plan, which is a 20-year long-range plan for the state that says we need to get education right, economic development right, infrastructure right. Frank went through the issues earlier, and they're in the book that you have there. But then what started to happen is one community at a time started adopting their version of a long-range plan. And in almost every community in Florida right now, in fact, in every county, there's at least one group that has signed on to the 6 pillars to say, we're going to take this and we're going to run with it in our community. Now, it may be called something different in each community. You may call it something different than we call it. But if we match up the 6 pillars, which are across the right, with the issues that you're working on here at the Beacon Council, they're the same. And so we're excited about that. And the same thing's true in Orlando, the same thing's true in Jacksonville, it's true in Tampa, it's true in Ocala, it's true in Clay County. And so our politicians are seeing that we're all on the same page. And we don't have time today to get into a lot of the details, but here's the thing that I want you to walk away with. Our state, Enterprise Florida, and the Department of Economic Opportunity has agreed to use the 6 pillars as Florida's brand new 5-year strategic plan for economic development. So if you were at the Enterprise Florida board meeting like some of us were, you saw them roll out the beginning of this 5-year plan. And it literally overlays perfectly over the private sector, the business community's 30-year plan. And so if you're, probably another conversation where you can have Gray Swope come back from Enterprise Florida and talk about the 5-year strategic plan. And I think what you'll see is your plan overlays perfectly with the state of Florida's plan, which overlays perfectly with the Florida Chamber, the Council of 100, Tax Watch. Most of the major business groups are aligned with where do we need to go. And I don't know of another state in the country that has that much synergy going on right now. So here's what I'm going to do. I don't know how many of you spend time in Tallahassee, but just a quick snapshot, right? So we've had 2 legislative sessions this year so far, the regular session and the special session. About 2,500 bills get filed, less than 300 pass. That's actually pretty common. There's 1,100 lobbyists in Tallahassee. The Chamber has 36. And I say that to say we take this part of the business very, very seriously. I wish I could tell you that Tallahassee is about putting the long term ahead of the short term, but that rarely happens. And so we have to be in the middle of this, giving voice to what's best for Florida job creation and families and communities over the next 10 or 20 years. Because remember, term limits, whether you like them or not, term limits causes long-term thinking in Tallahassee to be 2 years. Right? What's this going to look like if I run for election again? Who's going to do a mail piece? What's the TV going to be like? So when we come in and say, wait, half the people entering Florida prisons today have been there before. So what do we do in Tallahassee? Instead of figuring out how to change that, we figure out how to fund more prisons. Think about it. And we could talk about how that impacts education and so on. So bottom issue here, we have $70 billion budget. For the 3rd year in a row, we had close to a $2 billion or more deficit. This past year, no taxes, no new regulations, no new fees. Okay? Now, some people don't think that's a good idea, but it's significant because in 2012, we were the only state in the whole country to be able to say that. Right? So what's starting to happen is the brand outside of Florida is beginning to change in a positive way. I don't know if you've seen all the great work that the governor's done on national television over the last couple of months, but he's going to New York and talking to New York businesses about why in the world would you not be in Miami or Orlando? Why in the world would you be here? And he's talking about all these attributes. So that's a bit about what that looks like. Going into this year, the main thing we asked of the legislature was pretty much do nothing. We are in an economic recovery that is most upset by the government keep saying they're going to change things. There's more capital sitting on the sidelines in the United States right now than there has been in the history of our country. There's no reason businesses have capital sitting on the sideline right now except for they're afraid. Is it too risky? Is now the right time? There's a whole lot of uncertainty out there. So we asked the legislature to do certain things, but it's mostly to do no harm. So quick note here about what we were up against in session. If you look here, in 2011, we had 31 bills the chamber passed. This year we did 22. The significance here is Governor Scott signed every single one of them. And that is, you're not going to read about that in the newspaper, and whether people love him or whether people hate him, the reality of it is he's been 100% with the Florida Chamber on the issues that we've scored legislators on. Jeb Bush couldn't say that, and certainly Charlie Crist couldn't say that. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. We were dealing with major issues going into session, redistricting, right? We went into session and people didn't know what they were running for. Talked about the budget gap, the gambling issue that I know you're right in the middle of ground zero on, was taking all the oxygen, especially out of the Senate. Senate leadership issues were going on. So the media, the Associated Press, basically said, you know, lawmakers are probably not going to do anything. Forget the big issues for 2012. I'm here to tell you that legislature deserves some credit. We had a much better year than I expected. I know our two board members here could tell you when I met with our board before session, we had a conversation about let's just not expect too much because the legislature's telling us they're not going to do anything. And they actually did some things. So look at the dial here, right? So when you get in your car today, you've got all kinds of gauges that tell you whether you're going in the right direction or not. So pillars or one goal, one community, one goal, or a statewide plan would be useless if we didn't have a way to measure whether we're headed in the right direction or not. So I didn't come here today to get into a lot of detail on policy, but I want you to take a look at the top lines on the next few slides. They have dials that tell you whether we're pointed in the right direction or the wrong direction in Florida. So on education reform, right? There's good news and there's bad news. And we're talking about public education here. The green checks are things that we passed or got accomplished this year. The red checks are things that are unfinished business that need to happen next year. And I hope you can read that. But essentially what we're trying to do is line up what the workforce needs with what our public education system and our universities are providing. We have 4 different zones of education: pre-K, K-12, higher ed, and workforce. And in the past, they haven't all talked together and they haven't worked as one system. They've been 4 separate systems. So now here's the good news. Florida's gone in K-12 from bottom 10 years ago to top 12 in several categories. Here's the bad news. So we could be a top 12 state in the nation. Here's the bad news. 25 years ago, America led the world in K-12 education stats. Right now, if you look at the top 25 industrialized nations, we're 25th out of 25 in math, and we're 24 out of 25 in science. We're number 1 by far in how much we spend per student. So we have one of the lowest efficacy rates of what we get for the dollar. So this is complicated, because if I did a poll of this room right now, half of you would say the answer to education is more money. Half of you would say, no, we need to fix the underlying issues before we put any more dollars into it. And we haven't even got into the partisan side of the issues yet, right? So it's complicated, but this one's worth solving. A lot of good things going on in education. Here's Bill Johnson up here. So economic development. And by the way, see the dial? It's pointed in the right direction. This means we have about 30 different metrics that we measure. When you put them all in a blender, Florida's moving in the right direction on education. And you can go to the website, thefloridachamber.com, you can click on that, and you can actually see everything from high school graduation rates to fourth grade reading scores. By the way, Florida has the highest Hispanic high school graduation rate in the nation. Haven't seen that reported in a single newspaper yet. There's good news out there. Economic development. So the goal here, remember the building I told you about? We got to build a second floor, third floor. So the governor got on board early with our study on ports and taking advantage of worldwide opportunities with trade. Right here, Bill, your port is the first one that the governor said, we're going to make an example out of that port. We're going to make an example out of Miami. And I think you all are going to realize the benefits of that. There's some announcements coming up in the next couple of months at other ports around that are trying to follow your lead. But here's the goal. It's not enough to just bring more in to Miami, because as Bill could tell you, if these container ships are leaving empty, they're probably not coming in the first place, and we're not taking advantage of lowering the true cost. That means manufacturing jobs. So the reason you hear us talking so much and working with Tom and other groups to lower the cost of doing business for manufacturers is because that's the key to creating 143,000 more jobs. More investment into tourism, more investment into economic development. Remember, in a year where we were cutting budgets, the governor's budget and the legislature ended up putting more dollars into tourism, more dollars into economic development marketing, more dollars into economic development incentives. We finally have leaders in Tallahassee who aren't perfect, but we have leaders in Tallahassee who are saying, okay, you have to invest in these things if you actually want them to work. Infrastructure issues. First time I can ever remember in the last many years where we haven't raided the Transportation Trust Fund. It's another example of where the last two governors have raided the trust fund in order to pay for to do the budget. This time we didn't do that. So Secretary Prasad will be here later today. He and I are going to spend some time today, I think, out at the port with you, Bill. So we have full funding for transportation initiatives right now. And there's not much you can do to help with economic development in the short term than to do those. 270 regulations were eliminated in Florida this year. Many of them date back to the 40s and 50s. They just have no business being on the books anymore. Business climate issues. Look where the dial's headed here, please. So this is cost of doing business. This is time to permit. This is headaches dealing with the regulatory process. So Florida is headed in the wrong direction on some things. These are man-made problems, by the way, right? These are political problems that we've created for ourselves. The auto insurance fraud problem, Florida's led the country. Miami's been ground zero for that. We had some reforms this year. They were good. We need to do more. Property insurance reform, we got a little done. But let me just point out to you, in the Tampa area with sinkholes, right? So the government insurance company called Citizens wrote $50 million in sinkhole premiums last year. They paid out $450 million. We haven't had any more sinkholes, geologically speaking, than we've had in the past. But there's a new scam going on that pays a lot of people for this. On property insurance coverage, you know, this is a really tough one. It's politically hard. But we have $8 billion of coverage for $500 billion in exposure, right? The chances of having a $500 billion loss are zero. But the point of it is that's way out of balance, and you can't keep doing it this way. Unemployment comp, the legislature saved you a lot this year on that. Here are 4 things that the legislature failed to do. The hurricane insurance I just talked about. Folks, this is such a crisis. We don't have an income tax in Florida, but right now there's a multi-billion-dollar hurricane tax sitting on every one of us right now. Workers' comp, this was one of our big disappointments. We had an opportunity to lower your workers' comp bill 2.5% the month after session ended. It passed the House. The governor wanted to sign it. The Senate had the votes, but Senate President wouldn't let it come up for a vote. Legal climate, lawsuit abuse reform. You know, I know you feel this in your businesses. Some of you are just used to getting sued on a regular basis and you build it in. But nationally speaking, Florida has the 42nd worst legal climate. And you're sitting in Dade County. The American Tort Reform Association ranks every county in the country, and they rate you as the 3rd worst, what they call a judicial hellhole in the United States. So the point of this is, if your company is looking to relocate to Florida, and your general counsel's weighing in on this, and a general counsel comes in to CEO and says, whoa, 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 wait a minute, let's talk about the court system, let's talk about the legal reform situation in Florida. It's a big problem that's really hurting our brand with some site selection folks who are looking at moving here. Internet sales tax issues. If you buy something on the internet, right, do you owe a tax? Okay, I see heads nodding no. So let me tell you what the deal is. If there's a store that you walk into in Florida and you buy something, you owe the tax. If you buy something online, you owe the tax. If you walk into a store and buy something, Florida requires the store to collect the tax. If you buy something online, we don't require the online retailer to collect it, but we still require you to pay it. So there's about $1 billion, $1.5 billion that you all are not paying in sales taxes that you're legally required to pay. So our position is, let's close that loophole. Whether you put those dollars into education, or whether you put them into infrastructure, or whether you put them into lowering taxes somewhere else is a debatable issue. But small businesses are getting creamed right now because somebody's walking into a small business, they're trying out a tennis racket or they're trying on shoes. They're saying, oh yeah, I like these shoes, that's the color, they fit, thanks very much. I'm gonna go buy it online so I don't have to pay the sales tax. Except you do. Right? So we have a big problem here on that issue. I've talked about that. Pension reform, folks. If you think this one doesn't impact you, I'd really like to come back and talk about that a little bit more. We've got to move to a defined contribution system for new government employees. If you're already working for the government, I think you deserve to have the system that you signed up for. But for new employees coming in, this is just an unsustainable model. Nobody in the private sector does this. We can't afford this. We have to move to this. And then finally, the gambling issue. I think I don't have to tell anybody here, you know, for 20 years, the Florida Chamber's been against the expansion of gambling. We already have a lot of gambling in Florida. Our concern is what happens to Florida's brand when it's advertised around the world that we have the largest Class 3 casinos on the planet. And we come back and debate this some other time, but our board looks at that once a year, and I would imagine we'll stay the course on this one. The other side, as you well know, some of you are in support of expansion of gambling. They have more money than we do. They have a long-term perspective. I think if it takes them 10 or 15 years to get what they're ultimately looking for, I think that's what the fight that they're in for. And so we'll continue to be on this side. Right now we have the Attorney General, the CFO, the Ag Commissioner solidly with us on this, and so we can talk about this, but this one, I don't see this one going away anytime soon, especially with some of the court decisions lately that say that, you know, this could actually, the whole concept that, okay, it's only going to be in Dade County or Palm Beach County or Broward County, that's just off the table. The courts have said, no, it can be anywhere in the state now. So it's a tough issue for us and one that some of us agree on, some of us don't. Let me end with key dates and a little bit on elections that I told you about. We have a primary election coming up August 14. We have general election in November. Whether you're an independent or a Democrat, Republican, doesn't really matter much to me, but the Republican National Convention in Tampa, 3 times the media come to the convention as come to a Super Bowl. And they're from all over the world. So we're doing a lot of work with the governor. In fact, we're doing some stuff with him Tuesday in Tampa to really promote to the world that Florida's open for business. We're going to use the convention to talk about how Florida's open for business. It's not about Tampa, it's about Florida. So hopefully the Beacon Council and groups here are talking about how do we lever the fact that the world's going to be watching. You know, what TV commercials can you be running in other markets that talk about Miami and talk about, hey, the world's watching Miami, it's a good place to visit, a good place to do business. But this is the mess that I really wanted to show you. So all 160 seats in the legislature are on the ballot this year. 38 of those 160 seats are already done. They didn't get any opposition at all. There were 8 in the Senate and 30 in the House. And so we already know who 38 are going to be. They don't have any elections. But there's 396 people running for the other seats. And we interview every single person that runs for the Florida legislature, every single one of them. And we ask them questions about the 6 pillars. Where are you on this? Where are you on that? Before we ever make endorsements. So we'll endorse Democrats, Republicans, Independents. It really depends on where are they on the issues that the Chamber cares about. So those are, plus the 11 constitutional amendments that I talked about. We have the political department of the Florida Chamber. Many of you know this, but we invest significantly, more than anybody does actually, in the electing and unelecting people who support pro-business issues. But this is more important than what we do. We keep an eye on what's on the mind of the voters. And look at the disparity between jobs, the economy, and anything else. So 44% of voters say jobs and the economy, only 10% say education. Now folks, when you've been doing politics as long as I have, that's unheard of. Education is always the #1 issue by far on the mind of voters, okay? 4 times greater than the #1 perennial issue is jobs. And so you bet your bottom dollar that Romney and Obama are going to spend every last penny in Florida talking about jobs and the economy, and you're going to hear a little bit about education. That's going to set the tone for even local races. So our legislative races, where we might spend $5–6 million this cycle, is going to pale in comparison to $300–400 million that some of the presidential candidates do. So they get to set the stage for what we're going to have to debate about. And here's the irony in this slide. So Jeb Bush's former political director is our executive vice president. Some of you know Marion Johnson. She's a former state party political director. We do polling all the time. I have more polling than I can even have time to read. On the national stage right now, Obama is winning the war on who's best for jobs. He's winning by a margin. Who's best for the economy is Romney. Think about that, okay? Now, we also do national polling on which is better, capitalism or socialism. And right now, adults in this country are divided about 43–43. But then we ask, which is better, free enterprise or capitalism? There's about a 15-point preference to free enterprise is better than capitalism. The point of it is, we can talk about our education system and why don't these people know the difference between these things, but politicians are doing the same polling we're going to do. And I'll bet you you're going to see a lot of move toward what are the polls saying. I'm going to end with, take a look at what the business groups spend, the statewide business groups spend on elections. And the only reason I put that up there, this is all publicly available, you can go do this afternoon if you want to on the Secretary of State's site, but the only reason I put that up there is to end with this slide. And that is that as much as I wish that the unions and some of our friends in the plaintiff trial lawyer community and even the folks at the Sierra Club who were behind the Hometown Democracy Amendment, as much as I wish we could sit down and kumbaya over policy conversations, a lot of times you just can't get there because you're so different on what you want the outcomes to be. We call, the people I just talked about don't make anything. You all create jobs, you make things, you provide services, you do exports, you actually add value. The people that come up against our agenda typically take from you. And that's why we call it the takers and the makers. The significance here, though, is they're good people. The problem is we're just fighting for different things. But the takers who take from us, they spend twice as much, generically speaking, on the elections than the business community does. So this is a real complicated issue. So I'm going to end with, there's a lot of really good things happening in Florida. Our population's growing again. The average wages are up again. Our education statistics, contrary to what you read in the paper, are headed in the right direction. But we're in a political year. We're in an election season where Florida is the grand prize. And the rhetoric's going to get out of hand. I promise you that. There's nothing anybody can do about that. But I hope we all just keep the long-term focus in mind because there's a lot of work left to do. And Beacon Council plus Chamber plus others, I think, get Florida where it needs to go. So thanks for all of your time. I know we're out of time. Sure, if we have time.
We have time for some questions. Yes, let's give Mark we have time for some questions, so yeah, Jack.
Mark, thanks for your partnership on captive insurance. We hope we can do the same on enterprise zone legislation. The Florida Chamber does a great job on our state issues. Much of what affects our community here is at the federal level, particularly for staffing, customs, immigration, and things like visa waiver. How does the Florida Chamber interface on the national level with the U.S. Chamber? And
Sure.
what that is done about?
Sure. So first thing we would want to know is there's about 300 local chambers in Florida, right? And then every state has a state chamber, okay? So when you join the local chamber, you're not part of the Florida chamber. And when you join the Florida chamber, you're not part of the U.S. chamber. So 3 separate checks you get to write. Now the significance there is we get to work together as closely as we want to or not. I'm on one of the U.S. chamber boards and happen to be on speed dial with them and work very closely with our friends at the U.S. Chamber. We agree on probably 85% of the issues, maybe 90% of the issues, and so when there's agreement, we work together like hand in glove. Florida's important to them. In fact, they're going to be in this room next for a meeting that I'm going to be with them on. Some of you are staying for that as well. The U.S. Chamber focuses on federal issues. We focus on state issues. About 10% of what we do is in D.C. They help us with trade issues. We help them with things, and so the visa issue is one, for example, where I know a lot of people in this room know, we're all fighting for that, and frankly, we're making a lot of progress. In fact, when I got off my American Airlines flight yesterday here at your airport, I look up and Billy Talbert was there to greet me. I said, "Hey, where are you headed?" He goes, "No, I came out here to spend a few minutes with you." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Yeah, I need to talk to you about visa waivers and some of the progress we're making." And I said, "Well, yeah, but where are you flying to? Where are you flying to?" And he said, no, I came here, I called your secretary, she said this is where you were coming in from, and he said, "I got one of these special badges that gets me past security." And I kept saying, "Yeah, but where are you going? Why are you here?" And he said, "No, I'm here to talk to you about visa waiver." So it's, whether it's here with Billy or with Frank or whether it's in Washington, it's sort of, Jackie, it reinforces what I said earlier. I think we're working more as one. It doesn't feel like that if you read the papers and you let the partisan stuff get in the way, but I'm just telling you, you travel around with me for a week from Pensacola to here, and boy, are people starting to talk about the same issues, and whatever your political stripes are, we're starting to get the right focus. Anything else?
Yes.
Infrastructure. I'm happy to see that you are on the ball with infrastructure. Florida's been a leader in public-private partnerships for a while, and it's really lost its lead. It's with all due respect to our Secretary of Transportation, we've really just lost a lot of momentum. And there was a bill in the legislature on social infrastructure, public-private partnerships, that I think has been there a couple of times and doesn't seem to get past go. I would really like to see you push, perhaps, the Secretary to actually gear up the public-private partnerships that we got lip service on in August, but still aren't seeing. I happen to be going to a conference, the best conference on public-private partnerships in the country, next week, and just about everybody that I know there, and all big companies and big law firms, are asking you, when's Florida going to get off the dime? So
I want to make sure you have my email address so you can send me, if I sit down with the Secretary, what exactly does that conversation look like? Because there's so many moving parts on issues like that where, on one hand, Florida sets a model for public-private partnerships. You look at Enterprise Florida, Visit Florida, the Ports Council. There are other states who are saying, how do we be like Florida on some of these public-private partnerships? I mean, Visit Florida is probably the best model in the nation where you got a 3-to-1 investment of the private sector to the public. But I think issues that you're talking about, there's a whole new changing dynamic too with the indexing of tolls, and some in the legislature want to be able to bond that and lever it up for more public-private partnership. Whether we want to sell Alligator Alley or what do we want to do with tolls. There's sort of what are the easy things you'd do if it was just you and me deciding, and then remember the 1,100 lobbyists I talked about earlier? I'm not trying to give an excuse to anybody because nobody deserves excuses for not doing this, but we have 26 state agencies in Tallahassee, and they're using 17 different payroll systems. Okay? Some people get paid weekly, some people get paid monthly, some every 2 weeks. Okay? There's not a company in Florida who would have every division on a different payroll cycle and a different payroll system. So next time you have my friend Jeff Atwater in here, our CFO, he can't run financials for the state of Florida. Okay? Why? We have very powerful lobbyists who are saying, I can't afford to have my company not do the payroll for for this agency or for that. So it's, I want to know what you think the answer is, and I'd like to talk to Secretary Nantha about that, or Prasad about that, and then I'll give you a phone call back. And by the way, there's a lot about what I do as we go around the state. I need to hear, I feel like I'm a focus group of one. I was in Boca yesterday, I was in West Palm yesterday, I'm here today, I'll be back in Tallahassee tomorrow. That's what I need. I can't do anything about it if I don't know about it. So thank you for raising that.
Other questions?
I just make a comment if I could, not to be argumentative on that. I'm Bill Johnson with the court. In 32 years, I've never seen a time where there's been more collaboration between public and private. In fact, former Governor Bush last Friday over in St. Pete at the ULI statewide conference said he believes the best example of a public-private collaboration in America today that's working is, in fact, the Port of Miami. Everything that's happening at this port is a public-private collaboration. The Port of Temple, I mean, that's a 3P project. Every single thing we're doing, $2 billion worth of work, is, in fact, a collaboration. I think there's a lot more going on than you may know or see. And I think that the transportation, and again, I'm not being defensive on it, I think this administration, this transportation secretary, really supports this public-private collaboration. That's just my take.
Let me just comment on that, and then I know we got to be done. We have almost 19 million people in this state, and what I've found is everybody's right. Okay? It's just the perspective that they're looking at it from. Right. Bill, from your perspective, the world couldn't be better with P3s. Right. From your perspective on infrastructure and what DOT and the state maybe used to be doing compared to what we're doing now, might be failing. And it's not that we're right or wrong, it's that we really need to look at all those perspectives, because chances are, you know, like all of us in life, if we kind of out of sight, out of mind something for a while and we have a changing administration, you know, things fall and break, and it's our job to fix them. So,
Other questions? I know you're not shy, just got to be there.
if anybody gets to Tallahassee, please look me up. Would love to have a cup of coffee and kind of hear your thoughts on what we could be doing better.
Well, before you go, let me also, when you come here, you have to have a uniform. So this is our official meeting now with tie. So when you come here, we want to make sure that you're doing your tie.
Thank you very much. If I wear this tonight, will I be alone?
Probably.
Should I be?
Yeah, that's the question. I want to also just do announcements we'd like to make. First of all, I'd like to introduce our Consul General Pete Prince. Please, thank you for you heard about writing checks, right? Mark talked about writing checks, and you have to write 3 checks. We actually want you to write 2 more checks. One check is a little one. It's a $75 check. Next week, on the 20th, we are going to honor someone who I think all of you know, and really it goes without saying that a lot of what's happened in this community has been a result of his leadership, and that's Peter Delore from American Airlines, who I think many of you know is sort of retiring. I don't know if I don't think he'll ever retire completely. But there also, we want to welcome back, really, Art Torno, who many of you know before, but is actually coming back. So this is a little check. This is a $75 check. What's nice about this check is that when we talk about public-private partnerships, one of the partnerships that we've been able to do is talk about marketing. Is a fairly unique marketing program called Where Worlds Meet, and that is a combined marketing program. And I think it's unique in the country. I don't think any other area has this, where you've seen the private sector, American Airlines, Baptist has joined us, and the public sector, Miami-Dade County, the airport and seaport has been a part of that, Downtown Development Authority, and the Beacon Council, have come together to market this venue in an integrated marketing campaign for live, work, and play. So it's not just tourism, it is quality of life, and it is business. And usually to get the tourism people and the business people, economic development folks, to come together on anything, it's, in some places, as Billy said, they don't even talk to each other. I knew about his visit with Mark yesterday. Why? Because Billy called me and said, you know, I'm going to go see Mark, I'm going to talk to him about this, and then he talked to me afterwards. That partnership, I think, is what makes us unique. This marketing program is unique. The program, oops, here we go. The proceeds of this are going to go to the Where Worlds Meet campaign, which American Airlines really helped put together when we were looking for a way to generate more marketing dollars. So I think that's very important. The other check, of course, that after you join all the various chambers, you can join us. You can join the Thinking Council, and we'd be happy to have you as an investor in our organization. The program that we are going to be doing, oh, I also found out I didn't see her. The Consul General of the Netherlands is here as well. There she is in the back. I don't know if you're commiserating with Yap about the results of the soccer match yesterday.
Let's not talk about
I can't get a smile.
I'm still recovering.
I
I'm
can't
still
get a
recovering.
smile on his face.
That's our big
He's been not
They're still optimistic, by the way.
He's
That's
not a
the
happy
spirit.
camper, so. I just want to point that out. We are having another Access Breakfast that I'd like to invite all of you to. It is July, does our staff know? 25th. They know I know. And we're really having Steve Owens, who is going to be here from Swire Properties. If you come out of our building and you see all that dust being kicked up and folks building and construction, that is probably one of the largest projects, Jack, right, that we've seen in a long time here in Miami. It's an exciting mixed-use project that literally, as you go out and see, coming out of the ground. And it's something that we want to report on. So he's going to tell us about it. He's going to fill us in and tell us what that project is all about. I think you'll find it very interesting. It's been reported in drips and drabs in the press, but I think you'll find it. Rolly, you want to talk about what's going to follow here today?
Yeah, in the spirit of a free triple P. You get a 2-for-1 today, so if you want to stay, there's going to be an interesting symposium on the law of the sea, and Mark is very gracious of his time. We were able to do a 2-for-1. So we invite you to stay for that with the Pew Charitable Trust out of Washington. So, thank you, and we hope you stay for that.
Okay. And then I'm just going to ask your indulgence before you leave for a couple of minutes, because we have someone who likes to drop in here every now and then, and we'd like to introduce him to you. Some of you may know him, but I think you'll find it. And again, it's sort of a twofer, because you get Mark, but then you get this other guy.
By the way, as you're introducing him, so when I got to my hotel room last night at 11 after dinner, I have a note there on my bed. Remember, tourism is the ground floor building. So I'm just saying.
No. Are you serious?
That's what I'm saying. I'll bring it to you. But you guys are good.
It's actually scary.
If we could all be that good with what we do in Tallahassee, think about it. But that's good stuff.
Yeah, Bill's line is, when you're sleeping, we're working.
I tried to go to sleep wondering, is Billy actually in my room?
He very well might be. Actually, he would have been here today, but he has a large, I think, trade group.
Right, that's what he said.
in town. And he's out there doing his job.
Meaning we get more jobs. That's the whole test. Tomorrow we know the main numbers. But if you look around the state, what business is doing, what economic development is doing, chamber, everybody's working together, and we're getting a lot of things done. I don't know if you saw this last week. We got an agreement with the federal government on the Everglades restoration, which long-term should be good for the state. But if you look around the state, whether it's tourism, whether it's manufacturing, what we're doing with the ports, we've got a lot of things going for us. We've got a trade mission next month to Farnborough on aviation, and then we've got Columbia at the end of the year. So we've got a lot of good things going. I talked to Mark about this. We've got to make sure we're always ready for these sessions. They come again. It could either be good for us or bad for us. Next session is next March. We got to get ready. We care about to make this a better place to do business. We got to make sure we keep making progress every session. And I hope everybody feels comfortable complaining if there's anything that at the state level that's not getting done right. Because I think if you look at the individuals that have taken these positions, whether it's Herschel Vineyard at EPA, Grace World at Enterprise Florida, Dave Wilkins, who's now the Chief Operating Officer for the state, did DCF, they want to get stuff done. They don't want to do these things for a while and nothing happens. So hopefully if you have any ideas, you feel comfortable calling and letting us know. I had fun last week. I went to 22 counties. And you know, a lot of these counties, like it was in Swanee, they haven't had a sitting governor in 50 years. Last fall, I can't remember when we did this, but last fall I went to Port St. Joe. It's where the Florida Constitution was signed. And there hadn't been a sitting governor since 1955. And there are opportunities in every county in the state to do business, to do more business. And places like Miami are going to be the big drivers, but there's stuff that happening everywhere in this county, so it's really important. But thanks everybody for all your hard work. If there's anything you think I ought to be doing that I'm not, I hope you'll let me know. But thanks for all your hard work and have a great day.
So that's not bad, right? So now you gotta come back with the next one, because you'll never know. So thank you all for coming. Please have a great weekend. Please stay. If you'd like for the event that we're all talking about, and we'll have a great day.